I'm Claire. I'm the Chief Executive of Arts Centre Melbourne, and I guess my connections to the music industry at many different levels with many different people. So I'm a music fan, I guess, at the basis level. But since moving to Melbourne in 2014, I've really come to learn a lot more about the music industry and become much more connected to it. And I think probably the couple of things to mention, we at the Arts Centre, Hamer Hall is one of our venues, which has become, I think, pretty iconic, a pretty iconic hall to play. And the Sydney Myer Music Bowl is also one of our venues, which is, I think, one of those dream places that everyone hopes they'll be able to play one day. And then also more specifically, back in 2017, we opened the Australian Music Vault, which was a sort of a long-held ambition of many in the Australian contemporary music industry to really recognise the achievements of the Australian music industry in a way that was very distinctly Australian. And so the idea came up that we would work in collaboration with the music industry, and that's what we did. And so we opened the vault back in, I think it was 2017. Over that time, I've been so fortunate to meet so many of the wonderful artists who've given their material, and to hear some of the stories about their journey in the music industry. It's been an enormous privilege. Prior to being here in Melbourne, I was at the Opera House in Sydney, so kind of performing arts centres are my thing. So that's always been my connection, has been through venues. And it's a very different experience here in Melbourne. I think the music industry is very different. It's very present, I think, in Melbourne in a way that perhaps is a little bit more hidden in Sydney. I think there's definitely a feistiness about people who work in the music industry, and a sense, a real kind of visceral pride of being part of that sector, and it transpires in a kind of, it's like a fierceness and a real passion, and you see that regardless of what people's role is in the sector. So whether they're an artist, whether they're crew, whether they're a promoter, it's that same kind of determination, I guess, to bring what they have to offer to an audience. It is really different to dealing with other parts of the creative industries, for sure. I think in Victoria, particularly in the time that I've been here, I've really observed, and I guess, an increasing value that's put around contemporary music, and it's kind of it's an art form, and I think sometimes that is not always a mantle that people in the sector want to take on. Even just around, like, when we open the vault, or even when we open the hip hop exhibition in the vault, actually, just that kind of sense of, yeah, we're here, this is important, we're in the arts precinct. And that's a beautiful thing to watch. And it's a bit of a tribe as well. Does that make sense? Like, it's, I think, as probably of all the parts of the sector, there's a fierce competition, but also this kind of, we're all in this together kind of, that's since become a very jaded phrase, hasn't it? But that kind of connection, and yeah, we're all part of something that's really important. So that would be, I think that would be my pre-COVID, and obviously very entrepreneurial and creative and all of those things as well. I think what we should have been more mindful of was pace, and just, sort of the human impact of just that quantum. And was it too much? Maybe. But I think when you work in this industry, or you're there because you want to put artists in front of an audience. And if the audience is there and the audience is hungry, it's hard to not come to the party on that. I think instinctively we knew that people would be missing live performance. But we went out to our database actually a couple of weeks ago, and we asked them a series of questions about how they were feeling and coming back and all of that. But we asked them this question of what are they missing? And it's this like we're calling it love letters from isolation. You know, it's just this outpouring of like a yearning for not just experiencing music and art, because you can do that digitally, but experiencing the live experience. And that you know, I think you get such a different appreciation of the artist when you actually see them in person. And then the other thing that came through really clearly was people were missing having a collective experience. So, I mean, you remember that? Like, remember being in a venue with like 2,000 other people all experiencing the same thing at the same time? I mean, that's electric, and it, you know, it's making my heart race just talking about it. It's that collective experience and that connection, I think, that you get with an artist when you're with them in that moment. And I think people are really missing that. And I'm hoping that will translate into more value being put around what we do and what artists do. You know, I think perhaps sometimes when something is so readily available, you can take it a little bit for granted. And it's almost like, well, we're going to take it away from you so you really know what you're missing, and you'll feel differently about it when you come back. But it has been quite a beautiful outpouring, you know, for the venues, being in the venues, but mainly about just that experience of live entertainment. I think there are some people who are genuinely asking themselves, is this sustainable as a lifestyle? Can I earn a living from this sector? Particularly, not so much, you know, places like the Arts Centre, where a lot of people have permanent jobs or regular casual employment, but particularly, you know, if you're a freelancer, if you're going job to job, this has been the most gut-wrenching period. And I think people are genuinely starting to say, is this what I want? Is this what I want for myself? Is it what I want for my family? And we're seeing that coming through some of the communications that we're doing with our team. But I think there is also the other camp where, and I think this is the majority, where people are realising what a privilege it is to work at something where you feel that's your purpose, you're so connected to it and you're so committed to it. And when you're separated from it, you realise this isn't just a job, this isn't just what I do, I love it. And, you know, whatever role you play, whether you're in the crew, whether you're an artist, whether you work in payroll, you know, it's that connection to your work and your passion for your work. And, you know, I think that will bring a lot of people back, and people will feel differently about it. We're really encouraging people to not sit with that emotion, but to recognise that is actually a really quite profound thing to feel, and for some people a frightening thing to feel. For some people it is like grief, that separation. And, you know, we have issues with mental health in the sector anyway, and you know, we're trying through this time just to really make sure that we look after people and acknowledge the enormous emotional impact of being apart at the moment. To be honest, it probably wasn't until Labor Day that I remember it so well. I woke up on the Sunday and I'd just been sort of pondering things and just had this clarity that this was going to hit us at some point, and we needed to start thinking about it. So on that Monday, which was the public holiday, I met my CFO actually and said, I really think we need to put together a bit of a task force to start being ready. You know, if we get a case or, you know, if we've got a member of the team travelling back from overseas, and what are we going to do? So we started to think about it from that point of view. And you know, I look back on that now and I go, my God, you know, a week later we'd closed the Arts Centre. So over the course of a week, we'd gone from, oh, this is we need to be ready, to we're closed. And, you know, that the Friday of that week, so Friday the 13th, we were all called to a meeting at the State Library with the Minister for Creative Industries, Martin Foley, and a professor from DHHS. We're like, what? You know, and talking through what it was going to mean, and we talked about mass gatherings and, you know, social distancing, and even then it was like, social distancing, what even is that? It was so surreal. So, and there were people from across the creative industries there. And so, you know, lots of people from theatre and music, but also from the museum and the gallery and that kind of thing. And then the professors rolled out and you're like, okay, this is now serious. And you could just see, like, looking around the room, and people were just ashen. And, you know, Susan Provan, who runs the comedy festival, was there, and they were the first big cancellation. You know, they cancelled the comedy festival at the end of that, over that weekend, and you could just see this sort of look of, it was just disbelief, you know, people trying to process all of the information. And then I think because we are, as an industry, we're very tenacious and we're always trying to, you know, think of solutions to, and where's the workaround, where's the loophole. And, you know, I think by the end of that session there was a realisation that there probably weren't going to be any loopholes, and we were going to shut the sector down. You know, the initial decision we made, it was like, well, how long should we say we're going to be closed for? We just have no idea, and there's no, you know, no information, no guidance, no. So we just said, well, a month, you know, in the absence of any other information, you know, we'll just say a month. And then over the course of that weekend, you know, and then we had the Prime Minister make the statement about the 500, and we had a full house at the Sydney Myer Music Bowl on the Saturday night with New Order. So we were like, do we cancel it? And we, you know, we sort of worked through all of the logistics of that, and the band, and, you know, they still wanted to perform and the audiences still wanted to come. So we ended up, and there was a petition that we shouldn't be doing it. So you feel like you've got all these people shouting at you. And so in the end, we decided that we would proceed, but that we would give people the option, if they didn't feel safe to come, then we would, of course, give them a full refund. And I think, you know, it was well over 9,000 people in the house. Like, the majority of people still came. I didn't go, and I'm kind of kicking myself I didn't go, because it was like the last big event in Melbourne before everything then on the Monday shut down. So it was on the Sunday. I just woke up in the morning and thought, this is 500 is a moment. You know, it's going to quickly go from there. And so we made the decision on the Sunday that we would close the Arts Centre. I cried. I just broke down. Just, you know, it's so counterintuitive. We spend our every waking minute doing what we do, which is putting on shows for people to come and enjoy and connect and experience together. And to make the decision that you're going to stop that was shocking to me. It was just shocking. But you kind of knew that we just had no choice, and it was the right thing to do. It was the safest thing to do. And so that's what we did. So we emailed all the staff on the Sunday afternoon, it was 3:00 on the Sunday afternoon, and said, don't come in to work tomorrow. And then we ran the crisis team for another week and a half from here, from the Arts Centre, and then sent everyone home. I think what realised pretty early on, like on the first day, there's no handbook for this. I'm like, where's the frigging handbook? And of course there isn't anything, and you've got imperfect information, incomplete information, contradictory information. And so having to make a lot of decisions based on your instinct and really kind of relying on that more than perhaps is comfortable. For me and for us, I think the main thing was how do we keep the community safe? What's our role in that? And then how do we keep our people safe? And I think the most terrifying decision was that one on that Sunday to close before any direction to do so. It's interesting, you kind of reflect back on it now and you're sort of challenged about it. Were we too timid and were we too fearful? And but I look back on that now and I look at what's happening in New York, I look at what's happening in the UK, and I'm like, no, you know what, that was a really hard decision to make, but it was the right decision. And, I think the way that our government has, made the decisions that it has, particularly here in Victoria, where there's just the messaging has been so clear and so consistent, it's kind of made that a bit easier. But at the beginning, when it was just you just couldn't work out what was going on, to be so reliant kind of on your instinct it felt quite reckless actually. But you sort of have to give yourself a bit of a talking to and say, well, you can't not make a decision. And if you've got nothing but your instinct, that's what you've got to make the decision with. I have to say our team at the Arts Centre have just been astonishing. So there's 1,000 people that work here, and the senior leadership team is quite small, and just the willingness, I guess, of people to really step up into those very difficult decisions, and with great courage and great grace under fire became a bit of a watch phrase particularly at the beginning. They've been incredible, and I think for all of us being able to just be human through it. I think it would be easy to become very kind of closed and sort of defensive almost, but we didn't do that. I think we acknowledged right from the beginning that this was a very human experience, and we had to acknowledge that for ourselves, and how we were feeling, particularly at the beginning when things were just moving so fast, like it was just breathtaking. And to be able to have the courage to, say, I don't know. And when you've got, 980 people asking you questions about what you're doing and why and what's going to happen next, to actually not try and fill a vacuum with bullshit, but to say, I can really understand why you want to know that now. I just don't know. I don't have the answer for you. And it was kind of felt really quite counterintuitive at the beginning to do that, because you could see people were just so desperate for something to hold on to. But I think for all of the team to just be able to be honest through it, and if you don't know, say you don't know. People will respect you for that, and then when you do know, they'll believe you that you're not bullshitting, because you've not been towing them a line. So they've all been incredible and so supportive to each other. Some of them have had difficult personal situations themselves with parents overseas and children at home and sick animals, and it's been and partners, you know, who may have lost their jobs, and, you know, so they've all been going through the experience as people as well, but they've kept their, I think we've all kept our sense of humour. It got lost for a few weeks, but now it's starting to come back, and a little bit more of that kind of resilience, and I guess a kind of a real collective determination that we will get through this. We will look very different at the end, but it's what we have and what we do and what we bring it's so worth fighting for. And, you know, it's almost like that we're all just going to kind of link arms and keep going. And I think that's been the case, you know, not just in my organisation, not just at the Arts Centre, but, you know, across the sector. I think there's a realisation that this is going to be a long road out, and we will need to collaborate more than we ever thought was possible. Because if we don't, it's not going to end well. I have days when I'm enormously motivated to walk and go out on my bike, and then I have days when I just don't. So I've had 3 kids schooling from home, and that's been pretty intense. So we've just been, you know, best endeavours was a phrase that we adopted in the Spencer household. There's been no time to learn French or, you know, take up the piano or anything like that. It's been very intense, but just trying to do little things that are joyous. I have taken on cooking responsibilities on weekends in my house to give my husband a break from the relentless catering. So that's been quite fun, you know, just because I'm not a very good cook, so I have to really get into a recipe, otherwise it doesn't work. So I found that actually bizarrely relaxing, because I can't think about anything else while I'm trying to interpret and cook a recipe. So maybe that's my new thing, has been cooking. My husband is an excellent cook, and he actually really enjoys it. So I think when life goes back to normal, whatever that means now, I don't know. Now I want to spend my time back in live performance and eating in restaurants. Early on in the piece, when we realised that we wouldn't be reopening after a month, there was a moment with the team of just determination to be able to push content out digitally. And that's not something we do a lot of outside of this. And, you know, we kind of looked around at what we had, you know, archival footage, and I think like everyone did, and we found some, you know, some bits and pieces. But then we were like, well, actually, let's create something. Let's actually find some money, raise some money, and create some content to push out. So we started working with John Foreman, and he came to us with this concept of having a big night in. So rather than a big night out, a big night in. So we created Arts Centre Melbourne's Big Night In with John Foreman. And it was off the back of a beautiful piece he had done with the Aussie Pops Orchestra. And so we were like, well, maybe we can do something. And, and it turned into a bit of like a chat show, music show kind of thing. And we're up to episode 5 now, I think. Went to air last night with episode 5. And that's been a great joy, because we've been able to pay some artists, we've been able to create some new content, and we've been able to push it out to an audience who is desperate for content. So I felt really inspired by that, and just seeing the team's determination in bringing that together and working with John and from whether it be our broadcast team or talking about ideas for artists who might feature in the episodes, and then the marketing team, how we're going to push it out through social, and it's been a really beautiful collaboration. But the thing that has been so inspiring and actually made us want to do more was just the audience feedback. And of course, when you push things out through social, the response, you may not hear the applause, but you get the response. And it was just the way in which people received this, this offering was extraordinary, and the amount of joy it brought people and a sense of connection, and again, that reflection on it's not the real thing, but it's great. So we're now, I think we're going up to 10 episodes now, and we're hoping, now that the restrictions are being lifted a little, we're hoping we'll actually be able to get John out of his lounge room and maybe into a venue as a bit of a bridge, back into a live performance venue. But that was really inspiring, how that whole thing came together, and then how it was received. We're pretty clear of our identity and the affection with which we're held within the community, both the artistic community as well as the audience community. But also the other thing that really struck us through this period is how iconic our spire is, and how people see it's like almost a symbol of community sentiment. And it really hit home to us when there was the terrible, terrible tragedy with those police officers being killed, and we lit our spire blue that night, and that was just a way, I think, for there to be a symbol, I think, of the community grief and horror that such a terrible, dreadful thing had happened. And then the other thing we noted with the spire, we lit it. There's this beautiful tradition in the theatre. When a theatre is dark, you leave what we call a ghost light on the stage, which is there for safety, primarily to make sure people don't come into a dark venue and fall into the orchestra pit, but it's also a real sign of hope that the venue will be back and will be active, and artists and audiences will return. So the ghost light has taken on this real poignancy through this period, and all of our venues have ghost lights on in them, but we realised that the spire really is the community's ghost light. It's a symbol of safety, of gratitude to all of the workers who are working on the front line, but also a symbol that we will be back, we will return. So we made a commitment pretty early, actually, in the piece, that every night we would light the spire gold as the community's ghost light, and that's what we've done. And so I think and we've always done that. We've lit the spire for different causes, but it seems to have really kind of focused people's connection over this time. So I think there's that. As we now start to think about this period, as because we're about to go back into the period of reopening now, we are thinking a lot about, well, what is our role, and how can we fulfill our purpose if we can't operate in the traditional way of having 2,000 people sitting in an audience watching something on the stage. And there's always options. We could have decided to not reopen until we can operate at full flight, but we felt that would be a terrible betrayal of our purpose, actually, and there would be a lot of community, again, both artistic community but also audience disappointment if we did that. So we're having to rethink, how do we fulfill that purpose if we can't do it in the traditional way? So we will be reopening the Arts Centre, and we'll be layering experiences into the buildings before we can reopen the venues to their, traditional capacities. So we're thinking, small scale, live music. You can do live music to an audience of 50, and it can be utterly glorious experience. So let's start with that. And then, when we can go to 100, let's think about that. So we just want people to be able to come back and experience a live event and to be able to connect directly to an artist, not through a screen, but also to be part of that collective experience. That I think that's what the Arts Centre does really well. So that's the plan at the moment, is to, come. It's going to be a long road out. We know that, and we don't want to do anything reckless. We don't want to put anyone's health and safety at risk. So, we will be doing it sensibly, but we really want to make sure that we can bring as much to as many people in a safe way as we possibly can. And I think there are some things about the sector that have been brought into really sharp focus through this period. So I think, the very precarious nature of working in many parts of the music industry has been really highlighted. So does that gig economy, do those short term, kind of moment to moment employment forms, do they work? Can you sustain an industry if that's the basis of employment? I'm not sure you can. So and I don't know what the answer is, but I think we have to challenge ourselves about that. I think, we are an industry that is made up of people, creative people, whether they're on the stage or behind the stage, and without them, the industry is nothing. So how do we ensure that we carry as many people through this as we possibly can? Because I think we are at real risk of people saying, this is just too hard, I'm going to do something else. So how do we carry as many people through it as we can, but then really challenge ourselves to say, how can we be more resilient coming out of this? How can we create real livelihoods for people through this? So I think that's absolutely one part of it. I think how we collaborate across the sector, whether it be music or other aspects of live performance, I think is going to be critical. Now is not the time to be in fierce competition with each other. Now is the time for mutual support so that the sector as a whole can come through this, rather than picking off players who you might see as your competitors. That would be terrible. I think what role digital plays in the future is going to be really important, and how that sits alongside and complements the live experience. That's something we're quite interested in. And then for us as a venue, how do we listen to audience expectations in this post-COVID world? I think it would be naive to think we're all going to snap back and feel comfortable sitting in a room of 2,000 people in a short time frame. So how do we listen to what audiences are wanting and accommodate that in a way that's financially viable for all of us? I just want to get the venues back open and artists back on stage and just create those experiences. I hope we'll be able to take as many of our people with us as we can. I do worry about the mental health issues that are going to come, that are already coming, but are going to, I think, escalate. So I'm hoping that we can create, a sector that really looks after each other. And I think, there's some great organisations like Support Act and the Arts Wellbeing Collective who are making really good inroads into that. The other things I'm really hoping for is that through this period we will really rediscover our humanity and care for each other. I think there's going to be a difficult journey out for many. I think we're already seeing a lot of mental health issues that are happening with people being in isolation and the financial hardship. I think that's only going to ramp up, to be honest. And I'm really hopeful that work of organisations like Support Act, like the Arts Wellbeing Collective, will just become the way we do business, and that we won't lose as many people after this, perhaps, as we did before.